My billionaire dad laughed at me outside the courtroom because I didn't have a lawyer until I set one black binder on the bench and watched his face change. Throwaway because parts of my family still lurk on Reddit, and I'm not trying to give them a comment section. My dad was laughing so hard in the courthouse hallway that people kept turning their heads, like it was free entertainment while they waited for their own cases to get called. He wasn't trying to be quiet. He was trying to be heard. He wanted the whole building to know what he thought of me. He wore a tailored suit that looked like it had never touched a car seat. His watch caught the overhead lights every time he moved his wrist. And he had his attorney with him, the kind of attorney whose name gets printed on those glossy ads you see in airports. Her heels clicked. Her leather folio was tucked under her arm like it was part of her body, and she kept smiling like the day was already won. My father leaned toward the line of people and said loud, "Hey, you guys want to see something funny? My kid thinks he's going to take me to court without a lawyer." A few people laughed. One lady did that awkward half smile like she didn't know if she was allowed, and my stomach went hot. I was 31 years old, wearing a thrift store suit that pinched my shoulders, and my hand was shaking so bad I kept them in my pockets so no one would notice. My dad looked me up and down like I was staying on his day and said, "You still delivering groceries? Still doing that gig app thing? You couldn't even stick with college. You really think you can walk in there and beat me?" His attorney glanced at me like I was a file that had already been closed and said, "Mr. Langley is willing to withdraw his request for attorney's fees if you drop the counterclaim today. We can make this painless." I swallowed and my voice came out thinner than I wanted. "I'm not here for painless. I'm here because you stole from me." My dad laughed harder. "Stole from you," he said, like I'd accuse him of stealing a pack of gum. "I paid for your whole life. You think you own anything? You think the judge is going to listen to a delivery driver accuse me of fraud?" He stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. It was sharp and expensive and too much. He lowered his voice, but somehow it still carried. "You were always dramatic. Your mother made you dramatic. You're going to embarrass yourself, and I'm going to enjoy it." Then the bailiff opened the courtroom door and called our case, Langley versus Langley, and my dad winked at me like it was a private joke. "Showtime," he mouthed. I wish I could say none of it got to me, but it did because 6 months earlier I was standing in a hospital hallway with a plastic bag of my mom's clothes in my hands, and my ears were still ringing from the way the doctor had said the word hospice like it was just another step on a checklist. My mom, Janine, was 61. She was the kind of person who remembered your neighbor's dog's birthday. She worked as a public school counselor for 30 years and kept granola bars at her desk for kids who came in pretending they just wanted to talk about class schedules. And she did that thing where she cut the crust off sandwiches even for grown adults because it made her feel useful. When she got diagnosed, it didn't feel real. It was one of those diagnoses that people whisper about, the kind where everyone suddenly starts talking softly around you. And within weeks, we were in that small hospice room with the beige walls and the chair that was supposed to recline, but didn't. My dad didn't come to her last week. He called, he texted, he sent flowers with a card signed in a font that looked printed, and he said he had to be in Singapore for a deal, like the planet would stop spinning if he wasn't there to shake the right hands. The last night my mom was awake enough to talk, she asked me to read to her, not because she couldn't read, but because she liked hearing a voice. She asked for her favorite poem, and I read it without looking at my phone because I'd heard a million times growing up. Her fingers squeezed mine once like a tiny signal that she was still there. At 1:40 in the afternoon on March 3rd, the nurse came in and touched my shoulder gently, and the doctor came in after, and the doctor said the official time, and handed me the paperwork, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I signed where they told me to sign. My signature looked wrong, like it belonged to someone who was half asleep, and my vision kept going fuzzy. I called my father from the hallway, because that's what you do, even when you don't want it, even when you already know what the response will be. He picked up on the third ring and said, "Is it done?" I said, "She's gone." He sighed like someone had told him his flight was delayed, and he said, "I'm sorry. I'll be back tomorrow." Did she say anything at the end? I said, "She told me to take care of myself. She said she loved us." He said, "Good, good." And then his voice changed. "Practical, listen, we need to talk about the house and the accounts. Your mother had a lot of things, and I need you to understand how complicated this is." "Dad," I said, "not right now." He said, "It has to be right now." And then he added, like it was a favor, "I'll handle it. You don't need to stress." Then he hung up. I sat on the vinyl bench in that hallway for what felt like hours, watching nurses walk by with clipboards, hearing the elevator ding, staring at the vending machine that kept blinking out of order, and I didn't know that while I was signing her death paperwork, my father was signing something too. The funeral was the kind of expensive you can feel in your bones. The flowers were arranged like a magazine cover. The venue had those tall windows and fake candles that flicker perfectly, and my dad stood at the front and talked about my mom like she'd been a supporting character in the story of his success. He told people she loved the charity events. He said she adored traveling with him. He said she was proud of his empire, and people nodded like it was beautiful. And I sat there feeling like I was watching someone wear my mother's face like a mask. Afterward, my mom's sister hugged me and whispered that my mom had been worried about me, and my grandmother Ruth pulled me aside. My grandmother is small but intense. She's in her 80s and still drives herself to appointments because she hates asking for help. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and said, "Your mother left you the house you grew up in. It's in her will, and you do not let him bully you out of it." I nodded because my throat was locked, and she pressed a key into my palm, cold metal, familiar teeth. She said she wanted you to have one thing that was only yours. Then she lowered her voice and said, "And your grandfather's trust, the one he set up for you when he died, your mother kept it separate. She made sure your name was the only name. She made me promise I'd tell you after." I stared at her. "What trust?" She said, 82,000, give or take, meant for emergencies, meant so you always had a way out if you needed one. My chest actually hurt because I didn't know, and now I knew why I didn't know. 3 weeks later, I went to my credit union, the one my grandmother uses, because she said the trust had always been there, and I wanted to see it with my own eyes. I wanted to feel like my mom had left me a hand on my shoulder from the other side. The teller was a guy named Paul, early 20s, too cheerful for a bank. He pulled up the account, and his smile dropped like a curtain. He said, "I'm sorry, this account was closed." I said, "Close how?" He turned the screen slightly, so I could see. There was a transfer on March 3rd. The funds were moved out and the account was closed the same day. March 3rd. I repeated because my brain kept trying to reject the number like it was a typo. He nodded. "It shows it went to Langley Strategic Holdings, authorized by account owner signature." My stomach went hollow. Langley Strategic Holdings is my father's company. It's the company name on his office building, the company he treats like a religion. I said, "Show me the signature." Paul hesitated like he was deciding whether he wanted to be part of this. Then he clicked a few things and pulled it up. It looked like my signature, close enough that if you were me, you'd assume it was, but I could see the differences immediately. The way the J started, the angle of the loop, the way my last name usually narrows at the end, and this one flared. The signature line had a timestamp, March 3rd, 1:40 p.m. I actually started laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so gross. 1:40 p.m. was when the doctor told me my mom was gone. It was when I was standing in the hospice hallway, signing her paperwork with a pen that kept slipping in my sweaty fingers. I said, "I need printed copies of everything, every page, every authorization, every note." Paul said he'd have to submit a request. I leaned forward and said, "Paul, someone used my mom's death like cover to steal my trust. Please, I'm begging you, help me." He looked at my face for a long second. Then he nodded, and he went into the back. And when he came out, he had a stack of papers, and his hand were shaking a little too, like it had hit him that this wasn't just numbers on a screen. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in my tiny apartment, the one with the broken blinds, and the neighbor who played bass at midnight, and I spread the papers out like I was trying to read a language I didn't know. The transfer instructions were clean, professional, the signature was fake, and my father's company information was typed in perfectly, like someone had done it 1,000 times. I called my father. He answered with that bright voice he uses when he's trying to sound warm. "Hey kid, how you holding up?" I said, "Did you transfer my trust money into your company?" There was a pause. Then he said, "What trust money?" I said, "The one in my name, closed on March 3rd, transferred into Langley Strategic Holdings, signed in my name at 1:40 p.m. He exhaled slowly like I was inconveniencing him. And then he said, "Oh, that. Yes, I moved it. It's safer there. Your mother would have wanted it invested properly. You don't understand how these things work." "It was my money," I said. He said, "It's family money, and you were never responsible enough to handle it. You can barely handle rent. You bounce between jobs. You think you're going to make good decisions with $80,000. I said, "You forged my signature." His voice hardened. "Don't use that word. You're grieving. You're looking for someone to blame, and you're not thinking clearly." I said, "I want it back." He laughed, then sue me, and when I didn't respond fast enough, he added, "Wait, you can't afford real counsel. You can't even afford a decent suit." Then he hung up. I sat there staring at my phone until it went dark, and then I did what people do when they have no power. I started digging. I pulled my credit report. I pulled every account I could find, and I realized that trust was just the beginning. There were credit lines in my name I never opened, a store car from a luxury furniture place with charges that made my rent look like pocket change, a travel car with hotel stays in cities I'd never visited, a personal loan that had gone into default and then been paid off, like someone was using my identity and then cleaning up after themselves, just enough to keep it from exploding. My credit score was in the gutter, and suddenly a year's worth of weird rejections made sense. The car loan denial, the apartment application that got mysteriously rejected even though I had steady income, the insurance quote that came back way too high. I called one of the card companies and asked where the application came from. The rep told me they could mail documentation. I asked for the IP log. I asked for the device fingerprint. I said I wanted everything. Most companies treated me like I was annoying, like I was asking for a manager because my coupon didn't scan, but a few people heard my voice and realized this wasn't a game. One rep finally told me, off the record, that the applications all traced back to the same internet provider and the same billing address. And when the letter came in the mail, I opened it with my heart pounding. It was my father's condo address, downtown, the one with the elevator that opens directly into the unit, the one I haven't stepped foot in since I was 21 and told him I wouldn't take a job at his company. I tried to hire an attorney. I really did. I called 3 offices. One said they'd take the consultation for $400. One said they didn't take family cases. One said they'd call me back and never did. I ended up meeting with a private investigator named Maribel Knox at a diner off the freeway. She used to work in financial crimes for the state. She had that tired look like she'd seen every version of human greed. She went through my papers. She didn't say much. Then she looked at me and said, "You can prove he did this, but proving it and winning in court are 2 different things. He's got money and money buys delay." I asked what it would cost to do it right. She told me numbers that made me dizzy: expert witnesses, forensic accounting, filing fees, the kind of money you only have if you're the person committing the fraud. I told her I didn't have it. She nodded like she expected that and said, "Then you make it impossible for him to deny. You build a case so organized a judge can't look away. You're not trying to outspend him. You're trying to outdocument him." So I did. For 3 months, I lived like I had 2 jobs. During the day, I ran deliveries and took whatever work I could get. At night, I made phone calls, filled out forms, requested records, sent certified letters, learned what words got responses and what words got ignored. I requested security footage where I could. I requested timestamps. I requested signature cards. And when people refused, I asked them to put the refusal in writing because I learned quickly that people behave differently when they know their choices will be visible. I found a forensic handwriting analyst, Dr. Amara Singh, retired, expensive, and blunt. She charged me $600 for a comparison report because she said anything less would be insulting to her career. I sent her copies of the trust transfer signature and samples of my actual signature for my driver's license and old employment paperwork. A week later, she emailed a report that made my hands go cold. She wrote that the transfer signature showed signs of simulation, inconsistent pressure, inconsistent stroke direction, and multiple letter formations that didn't match my known samples. In plain language, someone practiced my signature and got close enough to fool a bank. I also requested the property records for my mom's house because my grandmother's warning kept echoing in my head. Don't let him touch the house. Don't let him touch the house. The will was clear. The house was left to me, and I thought that meant it was safe. It wasn't. The county mailed me a copy of a deed document that showed my name had signed over an interest in the property to my father's company as collateral for a business loan. The document was a photocopy, washed out around the edges, but it was official enough to exist in the registry. I stared at it so long my eyes hurt because I knew I hadn't signed it. I knew exactly where I was the week it was dated. I was sleeping on my mom's couch taking her to oncology appointments, and my father had been in Europe posting pictures of steak dinners. I almost missed the detail that changed everything because it wasn't in the main text. It was in the margin, a faint handwritten note that hadn't been fully cropped out when someone copied the page. The note was messy, like a person scribbled it quickly and didn't think anyone would ever see it, but it was readable. It said, "Sign it for him. He won't check county records. Tell him it's for tax paperwork if he asks." My mouth went dry because it wasn't just evidence of fraud. It was evidence of confidence. It was proof that whoever wrote it thought I was too stupid to look. I took that photocopy and my trust documents and my credit reports and my handwriting analysis, and I went back to the only attorney who had even treated me like a human on the phone. His name was Daniel Rios, mid-level office, not flashy, not cheap, but he offered a 30-minute consult for $100. He looked through my stack in silence, his eyes moving faster the longer he read. Then he set the margin note down like it burned. He said, "This is bad for him, like criminal bad." I said, "Will you represent me?" He leaned back and said, "You can't afford what it would take to fight him the way he'll fight you. He'll bury you in motions. He'll drag it out until you give up, and that's assuming he doesn't try to scare you into settling for scraps." My throat tightened, so what am I supposed to do? Daniel tapped the stack. "You already did the hard part. You build a record you can file yourself. You can force the court to see this. You just have to stay calm and present it clean." I stared at him. "You think I can do this without a lawyer?" He said, "You can do it if you don't try to play lawyer. Don't perform. Don't rant. Don't insult him. Just show the documents. The judge is there to read truth, not ego." Then he paused and added, "Your father thinks you'll fold. That's his blind spot. Use it." I left his office with my heart pounding in a new way Not panic, something sharper, like the first spark of anger that actually knows what to do. I went to an office supply store and bought a thick black binder, the kind with a hard spine and a latch. And I bought tab dividers in bright colors that looked almost ridiculous against the black. I spent 2 full nights building it. I put everything in order, not by emotion, by date, because dates don't argue. I labeled every section: trust transfer, death paperwork, signature comparison, credit applications, IP logs, property records, deed copy, margin note, delivery logs showing where I was on key dates, phone records, certified mail receipts. I printed 3 copies, 1 for me, 1 for the court, 1 backup, and I carried them like they were bricks. I filed the case myself. It wasn't poetic, it was fluorescent lights and a clerk who didn't look up. I paid the filing fee with money I'd been saving for a newer car, and it hit me that my father would have spent that amount on 1 dinner and never noticed. 2 weeks later, my father's response came. Delivered by courier like he was in a movie. It was on expensive letterhead from his attorney. It said I was unstable, that I was bitter, that I was harassing him during a time of grief, that I was attempting to extort him, and that they'd seek sanctions against me for filing a frivolous action. They set the hearing date, and suddenly all my planning turned into a single point on the calendar. The night before court, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every fear that the judge would roll her eyes, that I'd stumble, that my voice would shake, that my father would look confident and the room would believe him, because confidence always looks like truth from a distance. At 3 a.m, I got up and opened the binder on my table and flipped every tab again. Not because I thought something was missing, but because I needed to touch it. I needed to feel the edges and remind myself this wasn't just my word against his. It was paper, dates, records, ink, which is how I ended up in that courthouse hallway the next day, with my father laughing and his attorney smiling and my thrift suit pinching my shoulders. Inside the courtroom, I sat alone at the plaintiff table, my binder bagged at my feet. My father and his attorney sat across with a laptop and a stack of folders like they were preparing for a conference. When the judge walked in, everyone stood. She looked tired in the way people look tired when they've seen the same tricks 1,000 times. She read the case name. She asked appearances. My father's attorney introduced herself, polished, calm. Then the judge looked at me and said, "And you are representing yourself?" I stood and said, "Yes, Your Honor." My father made a sound like a laugh that turned into a cough. Then he said, loud enough for the room, "He can't afford a lawyer. He drives groceries around. This is a stunt. He wants money." A few people in the gallery shifted. Someone whispered, and I could feel the old shame try to climb up my throat. The judge looked at my father and said, "You will not speak unless you're asked." Then she looked at me again and said, "You understand this is a serious matter. You're accusing your father of fraud and identity theft. Do you have admissible evidence?" My father's attorney tilted her head like she was waiting for me to embarrass myself. I reached down, pulled out the black binder, and set it on the bench in front of the judge. It landed with a heavy sound that echoed in the quiet. Not dramatic on purpose, just heavy. I said, "Yes, Your Honor, it's all here." The judge's eyes went to the tabs. She flipped the first section open, and the room went still in a way I didn't expect, like the air changed when she started reading. I said, "Tab 1 is the trust transfer. The account was in my name only. It was funded by my late grandfather, and it was closed on March 3rd at 1:40 p.m., the same time I was signing my mother's hospice paperwork." The judge compared the timestamp on the transfer with the time on the hospice document. She didn't react with surprise, but her mouth got tighter. My father shifted in his chair. His smile wasn't as easy anymore. I said, "Tab 2 is the signature analysis from Dr. Singh. She concludes the transfer signature is a simulated forgery, not my natural handwriting." The judge scanned the report. Then she looked up at my father and asked, "Do you dispute this expert opinion?" My father opened his mouth and his attorney touched his arm, and he shut it again. I said, "Tab 3 is the credit fraud. These cards were opened in my name without my knowledge. The application records and IP logs show they originated from my father's address. The address on file is his condo, not mine, and the charges include travel and retail purchases I never made." The judge looked at the address, looked at the dates, and for the first time she looked directly at my father with something colder than patience. My father's attorney stood and said, "Your Honor, this is a family dispute being dressed up as criminal allegations. My client has supported his son financially for years, and he consolidated assets during a time of grief because his son was not in a position to handle complicated finances." The judge said, "Sit down." Then she looked at me and said, "Continue." My hand was still shaking, but my voice wasn't because the binder was doing the speaking for me. I said, "Tab 4 is my location documentation, delivery logs, phone location history, and bank receipts showing I was nowhere near the credit union when the trust transfer was processed. And tab 5 is the property deed transfer for my mother's home, which was left to me in her will." The judge flipped to tab 5. My father sat forward like he wanted to interrupt, then stopped himself because the judge hadn't asked. I said, the deed transfer is a photocopy filed with the county. It shows my signature, but I did not sign it, and the margin contains a handwritten note that was accidentally captured in the copy. The judge leaned closer and squinted at the margin. She read it silently first, then she read it out loud. Signed it for him. He won't check county records. Tell him it's for tax paperwork if he asks. The courtroom went so quiet I could hear someone breathe. The judge's eyes lifted slowly to my father, and my father's face had changed. The confidence was gone. His skin looked blotchy like he'd been running. His attorney stood again. Your Honor, I need a moment to confer with my client. The judge said, no, you don't. Then she looked at my father and said, explain this note. My father's voice cracked on the first word. He tried to recover. He said, I don't know what that is. That's not for me. That could be anyone. He's manipulating documents. He's always been unstable. The judge said, the document is in the county record, and the note appears on the filed photocopy. Are you saying the county forged this margin note? My father swallowed. He looked at his attorney like she could pull him out of the hole, but she looked like she wanted to disappear into her chair. The judge turned to me and said, what relief are you requesting? I took a breath. I'm requesting the trust funds be returned, the fraudulent debts in my name be cleared, the deed transfer be voided, and the home title restored to me. And I'm requesting this file be forwarded for criminal investigation. My father made a sound like a small animal. He said my first name like it was a plea, and for a second I almost felt something, not mercy, just the old reflex of wanting my dad to be my dad. Then I remember my mother alone in hospice while he was across the world, shaking hands. I looked at him and said, you're not protecting me, you're robbing me, and you did it while my mom was dying. The judge's voice was flat. She granted the emergency relief on the property. She ordered the accounts frozen where applicable. She ordered documentation requests to be complied with, and she stated on the record that the evidence presented raised credible allegations of fraud and identity theft. Then she looked at my father and said, you have lied under oath today, and I am holding you in contempt, and I am referring this matter to the district attorney. My father stood up like he couldn't believe his legs were expected to hold him. His attorney started gathering her things like the air had turned toxic. The bailiff stepped forward, and when the cuffs clicked, it wasn't cinematic, it was just metal closing around bone, but it was the loudest sound in the room. As they let him out, he kept saying family, family, like the word was a shield. I didn't move, I just watched him leave. Update. This happened a few months ago, and the reason I waited to post is because I kept being told to keep quiet, keep my head down, let the process work, but I need to say this somewhere because it still doesn't feel real. And because I know there are other people out there getting financially strangled by someone who smiles at them over Thanksgiving dinner. After the hearing, my father's people tried to contact me through every channel, text from numbers I didn't recognize, emails from assistants, even a handwritten letter that tried to sound emotional, like he was suddenly a dad from a movie. He wrote about mistakes, about misunderstanding, about grief, about how money makes people act strange. And he offered a settlement that would have given me a portion of what he stole if I agreed to drop everything and sign a confidentiality agreement. My grandmother Ruth read it and laughed. Not happy laughter. She laughed like she'd been waiting years for someone to finally see him clearly. She told me not to sign a thing. She told me my mother would have thrown the letter in the trash without opening it. The house title got restored faster than I expected. The court order forced the county to flag the fraudulent transfer. And for the first time since my mom died, I stood in my childhood living room without feeling like someone was about to take it away. The place smelled like dust and old paint, but it also smelled like safety. The credit card disputes took longer because companies move slowly unless you have money. But the court record and the investigator's report gave me leverage. Accounts started getting closed. Some balances got removed. My score began crawling upward like a hurt animal learning to walk again. And the trust money, the money that was supposed to be my emergency exit, that became part of a bigger investigation once the DA's office got involved. Because once you prove a pattern, it stops looking like a family fight and starts looking like what it is. A crime with a victim who happens to share a last name. Final update. The criminal case took months, and I testified, and it felt surreal hearing my life described in legal language, like the fraud was a weather event that happened to me, instead of a decision my father made over and over. Dr. Singh testified too. So did bank employees. So did a forensic accountant who traced transfers through corporate accounts like she was following footprints in snow. And the margin note from the deed ended up being one of the most important pieces because it showed intent, it showed planning, it showed contempt. My father was convicted, and he didn't look like himself at sentencing. He looked smaller, not because the suit was gone, but because the performance was gone. The judge gave him time, restitution orders were issued, and his company started collapsing the way tall things collapse when the base rots out. I didn't become rich overnight. Restitution is slow, and healing is slower, But I kept the house. I painted my mom's kitchen the color she always wanted, but never bothered to do, because she was always taking care of someone else. And on Sundays, I still make her breakfast the way she liked it, quiet, simple, no audience. The weirdest part is that my father used to call me the failure because my life didn't look shiny, but when the noise finally stopped, it turned out he didn't have anything except the noise, and I had receipts and a house key and the truth, and that was enough.